So what does it actually take to build a modern Navy? I mean, we're not just talking about the ships and the sailors, but the whole shebang. Well, we're going to break that down today, using the Sri Lanka Navy as our case study. And believe me, they are one of the most battle-tested naval forces of our time.
All right, let's start right here. This quote, it just perfectly captures the unique pressure cooker that is life at sea. A ship is its own little world, totally isolated, super high stakes, where one person, the commander, is responsible for everything. It's an environment like no other on Earth.
And that leads us to the big question, right? It's one thing to command a single ship, but what does it take for an entire navy to control the waves, to project power, and to win when it really counts? Well, I'll tell you this much. It takes a whole lot more than just shiny new hardware.
To get it, we first have to understand the fire that this particular navy was forged in. We're talking about a conflict that spanned nearly 3 decades, a fight against a really determined maritime insurgency. This was no ordinary war. This was a brutal, non-stop test of survival and adaptation.
The threat they faced was, well, it was totally asymmetric. The Sea Tigers, the naval wing of the LTTA, they weren't fighting a traditional Navy-on-Navy battle. No way! They used swarms of these small, incredibly fast boats, packed with explosives, to just overwhelm bigger conventional ships. This was a terrifying, deadly challenge that forced the Sri Lanka Navy to rethink, well, everything.
So how do you even begin to build a force that can stand up to that kind of pressure? Well, you start with the people. This is what military thinkers call the moral component. It's the will to fight. It's the very soul of the service.
You have to understand, life at sea is just relentlessly demanding. Think about it, long, boring patrols that can suddenly explode into moments of extreme, life-or-death combat. That kind of world forges a special kind of person, someone who's disciplined, always ready, and completely reliant on their crewmates. The sea is the first enemy you face together, and that shared struggle, it builds a bond that's pretty much unbreakable. And this classic military code just nails the ethos that holds it all together. You put the mission first, you put your team second, and you come dead last. It's this deep sense of duty that creates the moral glue you need to face down a fanatical enemy. You see, this is the bedrock. Everything else is built on top of this.
Okay, so you've got a strong human foundation. What's next? Well, the next layer is what we call the conceptual component. See, it's not enough to be willing to fight. You've got to know how to fight. You have to outthink your opponent.
And the key to all of this is something called doctrine. Now, I know doctrine sounds kind of stuffy and academic, but just think of it like a military's operating system. It's the shared software that lets thousands of people look at the same crazy situation and act in a coordinated way, almost like they're reading each other's minds.
Let's see this in action. The Sea Tigers didn't stand still. They evolved. They started developing suicide boats that were even faster, more agile. We're talking speeds over 40 knots, which is just screaming fast on the water. All of a sudden, the Navy's bigger conventional ships were in serious trouble.
The old playbook, that old operating system, it just wasn't working anymore. The big ships were sitting ducks. They needed a new idea, and they needed it fast.
And here it is, the idea, in its beautiful simplicity. The big conceptual breakthrough was to stop trying to fight a swarm of bees with a bear. The new idea, fight a swarm with your own better swarm. You beat them at their own game.
And this brilliant idea led to a real-world solution, the small boat concept. The Navy designed and built its own fleet of small, super-fast, heavily armed craft. They were made for one purpose, to counter and overwhelm the enemy's swarm tactics. And just like that, they turned a huge vulnerability into a game-winning advantage. This whole principle, by the way, is now a cornerstone of naval strategies all over the world.
So, now we have the will to fight, and we have the ideas to win. Now we can finally talk about the third piece of the puzzle, the physical stuff, the tools you need to fight. But always remember, these tools are pretty much useless without the first two elements guiding them.
And this is what it all comes down to. Effective sea power is a balanced mix of these three things. You've got the moral component, the human will. You've got the conceptual, the smart ideas. And you've got the physical, the actual gear. You absolutely need all three, and they all have to be working together.
But when we say physical, it's so much more than just ships, right? It's the whole ecosystem. It's the trained people, the logistics chain that keeps everything fueled and fed. It's the R&D to stay one step ahead of the enemy, and the information networks that tell you where to go. It's a massive, interconnected system. All right, so what happens when the shooting stops? Is a Navy's job done? Not even close. In fact, some of its most important work happens during peacetime.
You see, a modern Navy really wears 3 different hats. First, there's the military hat. That's for fighting wars. Then there's the diplomatic hat, building friendships, visiting foreign ports, projecting influence. And finally, there's the constabulary hat. That's when the Navy acts like a police force out on the high seas, tackling everything from piracy to smuggling.
And there's another huge role they play. Because naval ships are basically self-contained floating towns, they can get to disaster-stricken coastal areas fast. This makes them absolutely vital first responders, providing life-saving aid during horrible events like tsunamis or floods.
So let's bring this all home. The story of the Sri Lanka Navy isn't just a history lesson. It's a real, living example of what it takes to secure the seas in our incredibly complex world. It's a window into the future.
Take a look at this number, over 437,000 square kilometers. That is the size of Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone, the vast patch of ocean it's responsible for. To put that in perspective, that's an area more than 6 times the size of the entire country's landmass. Just immense.
So why should this matter to the rest of us? Well, because this huge patch of ocean happens to sit right on top of some of the busiest, most critical shipping lanes on the entire planet. A huge chunk of the world's trade, its oil, its goods, it all passes right through here. So yeah, its security is quite literally global security.
Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. The lessons learned the hard way by forces like the Sri Lanka Navy about people, ideas, and tools are more important today than ever before. Because in a world where our oceans are getting more crowded and more contested, the question of who secures these vital global highways and how they do it, well, that might just be one of the most important questions of our time.